Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Click to Buy, the show where we ask e-com experts for their best advice to help you turn clicks into customers. I'm your host Becca from Instant Page Builder, and today's guest is Laura Robinson, founder of Web and Flow. She creates tasteful online stores for brands that want more sales pings from Shopify. With over 7 years of experience optimizing Shopify stores, Laura has mastered the balance between beautiful design and profitability. Today, she's here to share her expertise on the key ingredients for a tasteful premium brand, why it's crucial to go beyond surface level design, and actionable tips for Shopify merchants like you so that you can elevate your store design. Laura, thank you for being on the show today. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you so much. I love that introduction. I feel like somewhat of a celebrity on Diary of a CEO. It's nice to hear it back.
Absolutely. Well, with your bio and everything you've been working on, you should feel that way. I think I'm always about that positive manifesting and thinking about what you've done. I think that's always really important to look back and also understand anyone listening in. She knows what she's talking about when she gets into the tips later in the episode.
It's so true. I think it's so easy to forget how much you do know or how long you've been doing it for.
Mm-hmm.
It's every year that goes by, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to add that. I need to update that. I've been looking at websites for many years now.
Absolutely. Well, I can't wait to dive in and ask you some questions. But I know before this episode, we were talking about what are we going to talk about together in our conversation today? You mentioned to me that so many brands out there are unintentionally becoming the Pizza Express of their industry because they're relying way too heavily on discounts. Why do you think this happens?
Yeah, I think it's such a timely question as well. We're just after Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or probably by the time this comes out. And I think it comes down to the fact that people panic over their short-term numbers. So if you haven't got that much experience in the game necessarily, you see things like your conversion rate fluctuate throughout the year. And it can be really easy as a quick solution to just be like, right, I'm just going to drop the prices because people know that works. But I think that's just a really short-term way of looking at things. And so I think that is why it happens, because they know that if they kind of train their customers to see a discount buy, then they're going to see that impact very quickly, instead of focusing on things like long-term solutions like customer lifetime value and profitability over time, which gives you a better picture of actually how your business is doing and who's buying from you and which customers are spending more. And so I think it's probably just a quick and dirty solution to getting more people to buy. That's without actually thinking through, do we want these customers over 3 months, 6 months, or do we just want them to get to buy this first purchase?
Gotcha. So it's really about those brands that are seeing the dollar signs. They know that, oh, that's going to give us that nice bump maybe a little bit faster. But of course, your strategy is in helping with some of those longer term profits that maybe over time are even more wonderful than those quick hits that you're, as you were saying, training your customers to just expect these discounts.
Exactly. And you see it very quickly. I think it can be a knee-jerk reaction to, okay, we're having a quiet month. I know, let's make everything cheaper. I mean, who doesn't want a bargain from a brand that you might have been sitting on the fence from? And it's not to say it doesn't work at all. It's not to say don't ever discount, but I think just drop your discount drawers for everyone and anyone is not the way to do it. It should be more strategic with a certain group of customers who, and this is where it comes back to understanding your numbers and why that's so important for planning out what discounts you can be offering, how much margin do you have, would it be even profitable to discount? I'm still kind of speaking with a lot of founders who don't have that level of detail with their metrics at all, and that is really what I'm trying to help with is can you even discount this much?
Well, that's actually a really good question. I think already we have a really nice takeaway. So anyone listening in, maybe that's something to think about as you rewatch this episode or afterwards. Can you afford to discount? Maybe it will work in the short term, but that's so interesting. So for these brands that are wanting to move away from this discounts all the time kind of strategy, what strategies do you advise founders use to communicate value and command maybe a higher price point instead?
Sure. I think there obviously depends on your goal. If you're looking to
Hmm.
get new customers, for example, and that's the area that you're wanting to focus on, it could be creating something like a starter pack where you know that you've pulled together your best selling products. You might bundle them so that you can reduce them a rate instead of buying them all as full and then offer free delivery. And you might, if you know your numbers, you might even take a hit on that first order, but knowing that they're then
Hmm.
going to be, you've got a really good retention strategy to then keep them coming back to you. So I think that's one example. Yeah, like just for new customers doing a great starter pack. But then I also think instead of just doing discounts for say like more long-term customers, it's about building like loyalty through things like points and VIP experiences and free gifts and nurturing more in that way, like value add rather than discount. So it's like giving them more instead of less. So I think focusing on really what your product's values are and how that, I guess, it seeds in their mind that it's worth this price. I think
Hmm.
one thing I see banded around a lot, and it's so true, it's like it's never about the price, and it's so true. If you look at certain offers that were out even this weekend over Black Friday, someone will pay like £1 for a bar of chocolate, and someone will pay probably £100 for a bar of chocolate, depending on the value. So I think it's probably more about conveying why you're charging that rather than we're going to discount it because it's almost signaling that you don't think it's worthwhile. So it's more showing that it is.
I love that, like showing what the value really is. And just like breaking down what you said, I love that you had kind of this two-part answer that number one, for getting those new customers, you need to give them that first initial offer that's actually valuable to them, that's actually going to really showcase the value that you do have. And then for the people who are your customers, continuing to nurture them with, you said, like points or loyalty or rewards or other sorts of actions which continue to show value without just dropping a discount here or there. I think that's a great kind of, obviously, as you said, it depends on the brand and what they're trying to achieve, but I think that's kind of a great framework already to start thinking about.
Exactly. Yeah, I think discounts, as I mentioned before, like they do work, but I just don't think they should be the go-to for every single time. Thinking about more how ways you can add rather than take away.
Absolutely. And I know at Web and Flow that you also work with a lot of brands in terms of community building. I was really curious, how does having a strong community contribute to this brand sort of premium positioning that I'm sure these brands are after if they want to command those higher prices and that brand image of more of a premium, tasteful brand?
Yeah, there's so much competition now that
Hmm.
I think the key to success, especially as we're going into 2025, is community first and building a fan club and a key following
Hmm.
around your brand rather than what we could have had previously, which was just I have a product, it solves a problem, buy it. That can still work if you're very niche, but the brands that I'm seeing having mega success are ones who create fans around what they're doing, and so it just goes beyond like the product itself. And I think the reason why that's so much more profitable is because we buy
Hmm.
from people, and I think now more than ever, with it being so noisy out there, we really want to connect with something greater than ourselves. We want to buy into brands that have like real value promises, real positioning, adding to our lives. Whether I've seen everything from an example at the weekend, I saw a coffee shop that also has a walking club, a running club, and they are doing so well because of that. It's showing that I guess we care. It really shows that we're not
Yeah.
just selling to you all the time. We're not just like going, right, buy coffee, buy coffee. It's like, no, you can come and be a part of like a mission that we're on. And so it really
Hmm.
sweeps people up into that. And I think the reason like more tasteful brands are doing that is because yeah, you're creating something that's more longer lasting and more premium. Whereas
Hmm.
I think if you're just wanting a quick buck, people can see through that and it just being about the product. So I think that's what sets the two apart.
Absolutely. I think that was also a great example of like how some brands can build this following and build kind of related activities or things that can really align with the brand itself. Like with coffee, it's a great example that makes it part of your run club routine. I know here in Amsterdam, where I'm podcasting from, there's a ton of run clubs, and a lot of them align with different brands and whatnot. And then maybe after the run, they end up at that little coffee shop having a little sip of something together. So I think that's a good example out there for brands to try to figure out what is going to connect with your customers and can it align with your brand. On that kind of topic of these community building efforts, I'm curious, how do they tie into other touch points like product curation, content, or even like a post-purchase experience?
Yeah, I think two main areas I would say are shareability, because if you're
Hmm.
part of something, then you're more likely to share about it. And that goes successfully both ways. So as a brand, you get the kickback from them talking about you, then you get to include them. And it's like this self-perpetuating growth piece. I would say the other part is you learn so much about your customers through these touch points too. So a really good example of that is a brand called The Calling, who are creating a really cool natural makeup brand here in the UK. They've got a WhatsApp group where they get feedback on their products. So you're constantly learning about your customers. And again, the more you learn from them, it's like you have your very own focus group on at all times. Whereas previously you'd have to set that up, arrange it. We're going through this much more nimble approach now with brands where if you include them in the process, you benefit from it as well as them, because you just get to learn so quickly about what they want instead of guessing. So you're getting that direct feedback straight away on like on their phones throughout the day.
I love that, especially that idea that customers will really feel like they're in that in group if they're able to give feedback that they see implemented, or maybe then they're rewarded with an early access to something, or like you can really have that where they feel so invested in brand that suddenly the content seems to flow from so many different opportunities from your happy customers.
It feels less salesy too. It's
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
I'm part of a cool products world and a group of
Hmm.
like-minded people, rather than like here's product buy. It's instead you're involved in something, and yeah, you get, and then you do get rewarded for that. I'm part of an amazing secret
Hmm.
squirrel group by a peanut butter company, Pip and Nut, another great UK brand, and they send me free stuff. I get new products when they're out, but they get feedback from me, so it's win-win. It's such a great idea of getting people along the journey of building something.
I love that, especially like if it was like a food brand, I would be all in. Be like, let me know, I'm down. I'll let you know exactly how I feel. I think that's definitely a great inspiration for
Exactly.
ideas of how you can get your community involved.
Exactly. No, that it's such a win. I think everyone was always so excited to get that kind of thing through the post, not just another bill.
Definitely. I think these days, like having something exciting in your mailbox, especially from a brand you love, especially, I guess this is a good timing seeing as it's Black Friday. So I'm sure many people will be getting many packages in the mail. Even having ways of including your community in those packages or things like that. We had someone on a few episodes ago who his company handwritten works with e-commerce brands who want to include like a handwritten note, and he was saying like ahead of Black Friday, that's like a really big thing they'll do for brands, is having like for some of your customers like a handwritten note, like thanking them. Maybe there's like a special offer, or there's like something about the product that was like special, and how that like goes a really long way in perpetuating more content or making people feel special. So I think there's plenty of community content opportunities out there.
Yeah, from small to large. It's something as small as a handwritten note, all the way through to
Hmm.
inviting your customers to a brunch or something. It's yeah, there's lots of
Hmm.
things that you can do to make people feel special, and the whole surprise and delight part is such a
Hmm.
nice way of doing that.
So we've talked about kind of two parts of this like premium brand puzzle. We've talked about pricing, we've talked about community. Now I'd love to also talk about one of the most important parts, which is the product itself. In your experience, what does it mean to create products with like a clear purpose, and why is it so important for creating a premium brand?
I think it's everything now,
Hmm.
because of the amount of competition and the cost of making something. As much as it's easier than ever to build something, it is also noisier than ever to create a product that stands out. So if you don't have a clear purpose, or there's no reason for somebody to buy, you just will not last very long in this market. I've seen it time and time again with people just like having a good idea, thinking they'll do some drop shipping around it, but people just see through that so quickly now. And so if the product doesn't stand up, if it doesn't have clear values, it just will not sell in the long term, because there's just so much competition and so much noise that you're just not going to stand out if there's not a clear reason for someone to buy it over and over again. You might see it on that first purchase, but then after that, because customers are so much savvier and they understand more about how brands work, they're really going to choose the more value-based version of you, especially if it's like for like pricing.
That's a great example. I love what you said about like the drop shipping and that like that's such an easy way for people to launch an idea these days. But with the possibility now out there for almost anybody to launch a product, it's really about figuring out like what's going to make it special. How are you going to create the story around it? How are you going to make it something special? I mean, for example, there are so many like those like little mini on the go blenders. There's probably like a million stores selling them, but there's only one or two that are kind of everywhere. And I think that's because they've really kind of created like a whole experience around it. They have a lot of customers using it. They've like taken the time to get that narrative going. I think there's so many examples of products like that where anyone could probably sell it, but it's the ones that are selling it the most compelling way that we're going to hear and continue to purchase from.
Completely. I think Liquid Gold are the prime example. Liquid Death,
Yeah.
sorry, Liquid Death are the prime example of that, where it's water at the end of the day, but they've, repackaged it and made it into something so much more unique. And I think if you can't do that now, then you're just going to really struggle with everything from your messaging, your content, who you're targeting, where your people are hanging out. It's not, it becomes an issue across platforms as well. If you don't know what your value add is. And I do see that time and time again in speaking with founders, is they can't really tell me why them. It is actually quite a common problem. They sort of know that it's a good product, but I think without that extra layer of specificity and benefits, it's going to be really hard to position yourself now.
Absolutely. Was there any products that you've seen recently, either a client or something you've seen shopping for Black Friday that really stood out to you lately in terms of like their messaging and their product?
That is such a good question. So many. Yeah, I'm trying to. I saw a product, and I can't think of the name. This is probably going to be a poor example, but they just launched a TikTok shop where they're doing the like facial rolling,
Mm.
and they were doing so well. I just can't think of the name, so it's very terrible.
But it's such a good example though of how like that first impression, if it's still like strong enough that it's like on your mind, even if you don't know the brand name yet, like it's in there. And when you see that like second retargeted post or something like that, like you'll be locked in.
It's so true, so true. I know that there's probably I looked at so many brands I think this weekend that I think I've just got a flood of names coming to mind. But yeah, I'll have to have a think about that one, I think.
No, no worries at all. I think like that's actually a really good point. Like for myself as well, I have a really hard time thinking about like brand names because I almost have just like brand blindness
Mm,
because this holiday period we're being like bombarded from any angle. So actually this is a great segue. So even if you don't remember a brand name, sometimes you remember like what it was that you looked at. And I think that visual is also a really important part of a premium brand image. So I'm curious, like in your experience, what makes imagery or design premium and how can merchants achieve this even with a limited budget?
sure. One brand that definitely stands out to me that did this well this weekend is Our Place. They make the really beautiful pans and kitchenware, and I think the reason they stood out compared to other people is that they don't just show they barely ever just show the product. It's the product in
Mhm.
situ. It's how people are using it. It's the breakdown of um, yeah, how it's made, why it's better than other brands. So I think visually they really take you on a story with them. They show you the colors in like lots of different scenarios. I think even if you have a limited budget, I would say getting some lifestyle shots in there as well are the key ways that you're going to convince somebody to use you. It conveys 1,000 words, as I say. Imagery conveys 1,000 words. So a product on its own is just flat, really. It doesn't get that emotional response. Whereas if your
Mm-hmm.
product's got some, maybe it's a before and after, or in use, or in just different areas of people's lives with a variety of different types of people using it, then that I think immediately will make you look more premium. I also think less busy shots as well sometimes. I think people tend to kind of like flood them with your product, but then too much else going on in the background. Or it's like, say it was like a brownie, but then you've got like all the ingredients laid out all together. And I think it takes a tasteful eye to understand how that works. So instead, I would maybe break down the ingredients and have them, more simplified so that people can see what goes into it, but not all in one hit. And I think even another tip is that even built in AI in platforms like Shopify now, you can change the background really simply. So if you've taken a sort of a great shot of the product, but the background might be a bit busy, you can use AI to change it to make it simpler, or put in a simple kitchen, or more of a lighter white space type background. And that again just gives that feeling of calm and focus on something, which just elevates it to being more luxury.
I think that's a great example of how you can use like tools to take what you have and with a few tweaks maybe turn a design that might feel more basic or commonplace into something that can feel slightly more premium. I know like at Instant Page Builder, obviously I see a lot of people designing different things for their stores, and like little things I see as well are sometimes just making sure that all your images like in a slider are the same size, like all like the little details. If you get those right, that can make the difference between like a storefront that looks beautiful and premium versus something that looks like a little scammy or a little hacky, which is not at all what you want someone to feel like when they're scrolling on their phones through your store.
Yeah, because it doesn't convey trust, and trust is obviously a huge
Mm-hmm.
part of why we buy. And if it looks like it's cheap and cheerful, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, I guess if your images are scrappy like that, you're sort of saying, "Oh, I haven't even bothered to spend time resizing my images." You sort of think, "Well, what has gone into the product then?" You might not consciously think that, but I think all these small,
Mm-hmm.
like red flags do spring into your mind of like, okay, well, yeah, I'm not going to buy this because the product's probably not as good as they say it is. They can't even make their images look good.
Absolutely. I think like right now I'm looking for some bridesmaid dresses for some friends, and I think it's on the Zazie. I've looked at so many different stores, but I believe it was a Zazie where like on their PDPs, like near the top, they have lots of like beautiful images with models, but they have like also images from users, but those are all the way down at the bottom by the reviews. So at least there's somewhat of a separation between like these are the quality, this was from the brand versus like you can still see the stuff from the people, even though like many people on their smartphones have various qualities of images, but at least there's like some separation still. So it's still like clear for me as a customer, like, okay, I wanted more information. I understand this is like what someone like me would probably take as a selfie versus, oh, these are the beautiful images that make me want to pay like $80 for a dress I will wear one time.
So true. That is such a great point on the use of UGC. I had a client that,
Mm-hmm.
because they had such a curated look and feel to their product page, they really didn't want UGC on there, but they have some amazing mega fans who are shouting about them too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you can still curate your UGC to make it feel
Mm-hmm.
on brand, or at least provide customers with some direction, maybe of, show it in this sort of scenario. But it's so important to show it now. People do want to see real people using it, but I still think you can, yeah, sort of use and tailor the ones that you want to fit in with what you're trying to say, because sometimes they're not helpful and they can dilute the brand.
True.
If it's just a poor picture, it doesn't mean it's a poor product. But I think
Mm-hmm.
showing the realness, it doesn't extend to it having to be a terrible picture either.
Absolutely. I'd love like kind of on this topic, like what are some of the common mistakes that brands make and what are some of the best practices that you've seen when it comes to just, let's say, like even just like a product image? I know you mentioned like the background, but are there any other tips for someone if they had to do it all over again that they should really think about?
Yeah, so such a good one. I think you mentioned one, which is the sizing, like the uniformity of
Mm-hmm.
sizing. So even for things like hover stay. Obviously, most people are on mobile now, but say on desktop, you want that rollover where, the first one might be the product, but then the second one might be somebody using it. You don't want that kind of jarring experience to be like square, then portrait, and someone's having to do a bit of a mental juggle just to see what's going on. So I think that. Another one I would say is people, when they're getting their shoot done, they might, because of this consistency piece, they might just go for, say, like more portrait or square pictures, but then they forget about things like banners across the site, and particularly even on desktop. So making sure that you've got shots that are able to maybe add text on, so there's some space in the visual, like thinking of it in thirds maybe, and so having some horizontal shots as well as some vertical. I think that's another one I see, is that they shoot their. I actually had a client recently with a video where they shot it perfectly for mobile, but it looks dreadful on desktop, and they don't have an alternative, but they've just got this squished, teeny tiny banner, and it's such a shame because the video is beautiful. But I think not overly focusing on one device and remembering that they're both is very another mistake I would say to avoid.
Oh, that's so funny, because I feel like so often people worry so much about the desktop and they forget the mobile one.
They went the
Apparently it can happen.
yeah, exactly. Forgot, but also not good to do. You don't want to completely forget about your desktop people, because they're probably more likely to buy.
True, yeah. You need to have content that's going to work for all of your screen sizes. Just on the topic of like the website design in general, do you have any tips on how e-com brands can effectively communicate their values through their website or other customer touch points?
Yeah, sure. I think the best way that I see companies showcasing values is by on thinking about this site as an entire journey. And what I mean by that is, I think people think that they come on the homepage and they should just maybe put their values all in one place on, say, like the about page. Instead, I would make sure that they're scattered throughout your entire site. So the homepage might show some brand values about the company, but then the product page will actually show maybe behind the scene videos that convey value, or all the benefits that you have about the product. And that could be even with like small, your own custom icons are always really nice. I think videos are hugely important now to show more about like why this product was made, but people often limit their values to like the about page and just like shove it all in there. So I would say it's about having different ways of showing it across the whole journey. And that can be all the way even through to your checkout, where you say, we donate to this company. If you buy from us, that's still a value. But yeah, so I think just looking at the site as an entirety rather than the values just being on the values page, and it's this one area where you check mark values. It's something that should be felt through your copy and imagery across the whole site.
Such a great example. I was just thinking, sparked by what you said, of when I was shopping for Black Friday this weekend. I was shopping on a website, I can't remember where now, so I did too much shopping, but the banner even said like the CTA was buy and donate, which immediately like got my attention. I was like, so like by purchasing at your store, I'm also making a donation. Like then I instantly clicked through because I was really curious. Like that already told me so much about, especially in a time of like over kind of consumerism. It's like, oh, but maybe I can buy this from this store and I'm also making a difference. So I think that's a great example of how like any page, you also mentioned the checkout, like there's also ways of showing your brand values there. Definitely lots of inspiration for people listening in on unique ideas for how to convey your values.
Yeah, I think even in your footer, you can add your mission in there. It's like a small statement. It can be check marks on your description on like a collection page at the top. It can be custom icons to show exactly what your benefits are from your company, what the benefits are of the product, why you've made them as a founder. I think it's an area that people just don't think about enough. They just think about purely the product instead of like where you're positioned in the market and what you're trying to achieve with your brand.
I love that. I think that's definitely food for thought for anyone listening in. Definitely something to keep thinking about. Don't forget about it. Like it's worth the time. Your brand exists for a reason. So it's kind of a good idea to have an idea about that when you're thinking about how to design your store, how to curate your customer experience, to really pull back to those values that you have and hopefully can shape as you grow with your product and with your community.
Exactly. yeah, I don't think there are something that, yeah, I think you might start off with one thing, but it can
Mm-hmm.
expand, kind of circling back to the community part. Initially, if you're just starting out, you
Mm-hmm.
might not have that bit, but it's something that you aim to build. And, as you build that, you could create things like memberships and events and include that as part of, they're still your values. It showcases that you're like considering that as part of building something.
I love that. I think that's a great addition to how you can think about your brand evolving as you get more and more investment from your community and maybe inspiration for what they want and how you can approach that in different ways, like those examples that you mentioned. Well, Laura, I would love to have you on for another hour, but unfortunately, we're reaching near the end of the episode. Maybe we'll have to have you back on. But before I let you go, I always need to end with a click-worthy tip, which is one short piece of advice for any brands listening in or any merchants out there. So, Laura, for any merchants who are listening in right now, what's one change they could make today to begin elevating their brand?
It has to be creating videos right now. Customers are just getting more and more used to shopping on social, and they really
Hmm.
expect that type of experience on your website. And it could be starting off, and so I'd say even starting off with movement. So it could be a GIF, starting off something really small, like pulling your images together to just make a GIF, which is really easy to do with static imagery that you have now. But then as
Hmm.
you expand upon that and you invest some budget and time into it, videos are like just what people expect now in order to make buying decisions.
100%. I totally agree with you. I think like we see it in so many areas of content, like videos are the thing right now, and it makes sense that that would now become such a crucial part of our shopping journey as well.
Yeah, it's not thought about on websites still enough, I think, but we're
Hmm.
moving more and more towards that direction where we're treating websites like socials, like TikTok Shop,
Hmm.
I would say. So it is not, it's an obvious one, but I still think it's not being utilized enough.
Absolutely. So if you're listening in and you've caught all these tips today, definitely think if are you utilizing video marketing enough? Maybe there's room for improvement there. Of course, Laura, I know where to find you if I have more questions or need more inspiration. But for anyone listening in who's like, wow, I really want to learn more from Laura and hear what she's doing at Web and Flow, where can we find you online?
Sure. So I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. Yeah, searching Laura Robinson one. I think that should come up. It's probably one of the most common names in the UK, so adding the one on there will help. And then I'm on Instagram at web.and.flow.
Perfect. We'll be sure to add those in the show notes as well. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can just click the link. Otherwise, you've heard it here and you can Google her, you can find her. We'll find a way or leave a review. We'll put you in touch. Well, Laura, thank you so much for being on today's episode of Click to Buy.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, it's been definitely a great conversation. I know I learned a lot. So thanks, Laura, for sharing your tips on what it takes to become a tasteful premium brand. Once again, I'm your host, Becca Anderson. If you're listening in and you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, share it with all the fellow e-commerce enthusiasts in your network. And until next time, keep turning those clicks into buys.